Of course, there's been a lot of record labels that have come up in the last few years that have really focused on unearthing all these gems,
right,
and presenting them really brilliantly, from Numero Records to all the European labels, Soundway, all that stuff, doing a great job. But when you were doing that, early days, Stones Throw, Now Again, there weren't so many people doing that. I mean,
no.
Ubiquity had done a little bit of that.
Ubiquity
right?
had, and I'd worked with Michael and Jody. I mean, I know that you've known them for many years, and I worked with them on a series of projects, and I always respected them, but I wanted my business model to be different. Like, I didn't want to do master purchases. I wanted to do licensing agreements, I wanted to be able to use the music for the purpose of creating hip-hop, because I'm working with guys like Madlib and Doom and Dilla, and, I needed to give them source material. If I could clear the samples, it's even better, right? So I approached all that stuff kind of like, this is fodder for, me spiritually and also to make new music with. But then at the same time, I was a big fan of the annotation style that was done by people like Harry Weinger and Alan Leeds on all those James Brown reissues from the early 90s to the mid 90s. I was a huge fan of what they did and how they told the story, and how these sessions, for which we had no idea who did what, were annotated and put out on CD and LP form. So I started following that. And, in a lot of ways, I don't think that I was blazing any new ground, because there was a lot of other people that had done it with different genres, but not for deep soul and funk and esoteric jazz. There was very little of that at the time.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing about you as well is that you really, there was the film, was it the Kashmere
Stage Band, yeah.
That's a great movie, right?
Thank you, man.
Such a great film.
It's a great film.
And you see how deep you go in,
and
you commit your absolute full-on. How could you do any other jobs when you're sort of doing these?
It was back then, it was full on, and I was trying to explain to somebody the other day, like, I spent my 20s, working 16, 17 hours a day, and I was just on all the time. And so, like, I missed a lot of things, like, I wasn't at the club, I wasn't at the first Banksy show. I was explaining because my office manager at the time at Stones Throw, who helped produce the first Banksy show in LA, she was like, I need to do this show. And I was a fan of Banksy's, because I liked his stuff that I saw in these magazines that were coming out of the UK. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll work late then. Like, that was what I did, And, I look back at it and I don't regret it, because moments like, meeting Conrad Johnson and then persevering to see his music reissued, and then, like, literally, helping transition his legacy while he was still alive, to the next generation of fans, like, that was the result of it, So
it's incredible. So, okay, so you did all this heavy, hardcore A&R work, right, at Stones Throw. You were an important link with the b-boy hip-hop generation by going out, and I see that connection, getting some of those original samples, licensing them, therefore you don't have to go through the nightmare of uncleared samples.
Absolutely,
and
as much as possible.
And you're giving them some fresh source material that they haven't found, or some freshness. And in a way, some of these uncleared samples have actually been a bonus for you in the long, because you've met some of these people searching for the money, right?
Melvin Van Peebles.
Right.
We're doing a project with him and the Heliocentrics, Malcolm Caddo and Jake Ferguson, and these guys, one of my favorite bands in the world. And we were able to team up the Heliocentrics and Melvin Van Peebles for a beautiful, weird album that's going to come out this year. And that introduction happened because he busted Stones Throw for the uncleared samples on the Quasimoto albums.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, but all these guys, I've always looked at it as a challenge, like, okay, can I explain to them, my aesthetic view on this, and why the business side, while I understand it, made it impractical to clear it up front, and can we come to an understanding? Can we make amends? And then can we work together in the future? Because, man, there's so many more opportunities if we don't take it like a punitive approach to this. And, I've been very lucky. Most times that does happen. Yeah,
I mean, I found it quite tricky, because I love working with the more senior generations of musicians. I get so much pleasure out of working with and talking to people like Charles Tolliver or
of course
Ayeto, all these people. They've got so much to say, and I love it as something I just enjoy in what I do. And but sometimes what I find can be a bit tricky is if these idols, you end up working with them, that can kind of get a little bit...
Absolutely.
It can get a little bit dark.
Yeah, it can.
Because you don't want to upset them, and then suddenly because when you're a fan, everything's sweet, and but when you want to work with them, then it can get really bad, right?
Yeah, and you know, I won't lie and say that working with Melvin Van Peebles is easy. You know, we for 4 years were, you know, getting him to record and re-record this, you know, beautiful poem he wrote, which the Heliocentrics based the album around. And it was pretty hectic, you know, because like the guy's 82, but he can kick my ass, you know. And like I'm in a little studio with one of Sunra's old engineers in Harlem, and like, you know, there's no air conditioning. It's 100 degrees outside, and I'm trying to get him to do take after take, and he's looking at me like, dude, stop. And it's, you know, and I respect the hell out of that guy. So what do you say?
Wow.
You know, you just let that awkward moment pass and move on.
I was looking at what you've released on the label. It's quite a lot of stuff now, right?
Yeah, it is. We've been going on, 12 years.
Amazing artwork.
Thank
if you look at it as a whole.
Thank you.
Beautiful. I saw that you did Myron E. I didn't realize that was.
Yeah.
I thought that was. Yeah, I was always confused about that because it's on Timian, but I knew it was done from LA. Tell me a bit more about that.
It was, well, you know, like the thing with Stone's Throw was that, you know, we had this really amazing organic label, right? It grew together, but it was also like a mess. Like, you know, like all these different roots came together, and like, you know, starting to untangle them at a certain point, it just seemed like an impossibility. So the best way to approach it, I thought, was just, well, like everything is Stone's Throw. So if something I'm doing, or if it's something Madlib's doing, even if it's not part of Stone's Throw, let's find a way to make it all seem like it's part of this bigger picture. So the Myron E thing was just simple. Like, you know, they needed some help. They needed to sell their records. They had no distribution, no one really working to market the project in LA, America, period. So I said, well, let me get involved in this. I'll do it myself, and then, you know, I can run it through the Stone's Throw channels. It'll be good for everybody. It's like the alternative to like what Mayor Hawthorne and Aloe Black are doing. Like,
was it before them?
It was right around the same time, but it was like a point-counterpoint thing. And I thought how cool it would be. Like, we have Mayor Hawthorne with like this more like pop-polished approach, and then we have this really underground thing with Myron E, and it would make more sense, you know, for Stone's Throw. And I thought it did. And then Aloe Black came out, of course, and that was sort of the ultimate, you know, kind of step in that progression.
Wow. The other one that you released was Dimlite.
Yeah.
So on the other side, and I think he's one of the greatest, right?
Well, I mean, I'm so happy to hear you say that. He is one of the greatest. And an unsung hero, like one of those guys in the margins, like we were talking about with Charles Tolliver, right? In between scenes, and everybody in the scenes know who he is, but, you know, he's a just reserved, incredible, genius producer living in Switzerland, making awesome music. And Prefuse was the one who told me. He said, you know, hey man, you really need to put out Dimlite's music. I'm like, you sure that's gonna work? He's like, well, I'm not sure, but man, you need to get behind this. Like, you know, step up to the plate. Come on.
Yeah.
And I was like, you're absolutely right. And I called up Dimlite, and he was like, yeah, man, I'm game. Let's do it.
I just love the fact that he'll just go off and go and walk in the mountains for 6 months, and you won't hear from him. You know, he's brilliant. He's such an artist.
And then he comes back with this amazing music, and you're just like, well, that's.
And amazing live. I did a show with him a few years ago, and it was I can't remember, it was him and a drummer, and it was just like.
I remember that.
Yeah.
I saw some footage of that show.
So strong.
Proper occasion. That's the unreleased JB's album that was scheduled for release on King Records in 1971.
For the one and only John Wayne.
But I just have to wait. Happy every